The history we've all been taught is a massive lie. Before the civilization we have today, there was another civilization that's been hidden from us. The Tartarian Empire was a civilization that was far more advanced than us, but in a different way. They had harnessed the ability to use atmospheric energy. They incorporated it into all of the buildings and were able to create free energy for everyone at all times. They had also harnessed the power of frequencies and were able to build grand architecture by manipulating substances and moving huge rocks through vibration. Hence the Great Pyramids and many other unexplainable architectural anomalies that were created in the past. The free energy was a threat to the massive oil industry and all the profits they were able to generate from the scarcity of oil. So the owners of this industry, who were extremely powerful, created a plan to take out this civilization and wipe them from history so nobody would ever know about free energy, and they destroyed all their architecture and technology. They did their best to cover up any evidence that the Tartarians ever existed. So this is why...
You know the Mars theory?
That there's aliens on Mars?
Nah, there's a theory that Mars was the original planet that humans were from.
Okay.
Then something happened that we all had to fly to another planet and live on. There used to be like civilization that lived on Mars. Now back this. On Mars, there's an element on the periodic table called xenon. Xenon on Earth is only found, this is crazy, is only found after a nuclear explosion.
No.
Oh shit, that's not even the secret mode button.
I said no.
What the hell? And it goes hand in hand now. What if on Mars there was a nuclear warfare, destroyed the whole planet, but people were able to escape just in time, landed on Earth, and they had to restart from nothing.
So we are the aliens.
We're the aliens. What the hell?
Yeah?
It's real shit. Like, this element's called xenon. It's prominent after nuclear explosion.
Have you ever seen this map? As the name states, New Standard Map of the World from the 18th century. One of the pieces from my collection. One of the most notable things, of course, how all the continents are surrounded by an ice wall. If you look at the right-hand side of the map, you can see what countries have patented it. England, Canada, France, Sweden, Denmark, Austria, Germany. Very interesting. Why would these nations would collaborate to make a map like this? Of course, this map raises many other questions. But most importantly, it would be interesting to hear what do you think? Why this version is so different? And if you follow my account, I will be showing you the rest of my collection. I think this is one of the newest maps that I have. But no less, very significant. You can find this map online pretty easily if you just type in the name. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? And before I go, I just want to add that this map is also used on UN logo too. A coincidence, most likely.
One of the things that I want to talk to you about is the JFK files. And one of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
So I opened them up partially. I was met with, from good people, I mean, good people. People that were well-meaning. Mike Pompeo was one of them. He's a good person. They called me, they said, sir, would rather have you not. And I did open them. But I was asked by some people not to open them. There's a Martin Luther King file, too, by the way, that they'd like to see. I don't know if you know, but there is that. But JFK in particular. So they called me.
Imagine an entire civilization erased by a catastrophe so massive it buried cities in an instant. This is the theory of the mud flood and the mysterious fall of Tartaria. The story goes that Tartaria was a vast and advanced empire stretching across Eurasia. Its people were masters of architecture and technology, building cities that defied the imagination. But then something happened, something so devastating that it wiped Tartaria off the map. The mud flood theory suggests that a global catastrophic event occurred in the 18th or 19th century, covering entire cities in layers of mud. Buildings were submerged, streets disappeared, and an empire was buried beneath the earth. The evidence? Look around. Ever notice buildings with windows or doors at ground level or even below? Some say these are remnants of structures buried by the mud, hinting at a world that existed before the flood. But why haven't we heard of this before? Some believe the history of Tartaria was deliberately erased, hidden by those in power who wanted to rewrite history. Maps were redrawn, textbooks rewritten, and the true story of Tartaria was buried along with the mud. The mud flood theory challenges everything we think we know about the past. What if the history we've been taught is just the surface layer, hiding a buried truth underneath? The evidence is out there, waiting to be uncovered, if you know where to look.
Did you know that one of the most advanced ancient civilizations vanished without warning? Have you ever thought how a flourishing empire could collapse overnight, leaving no trace? It was the mighty Indus Valley Civilization, one of the world's earliest urban cultures. Over 5,000 years ago, this civilization thrived in modern-day Pakistan and India, with advanced city planning, sewage systems, and even a writing system we still can't decipher today. But then, in a mysterious twist of fate, they disappeared. No one knows for certain what happened to them. Some say it was a catastrophic flood, others believe in a brutal invasion. But here's the shocking part. Evidence suggests that they may have abandoned their cities voluntarily. Why would such a powerful civilization walk away from everything they built? Could it be climate change, internal conflict, or something even more mysterious, like a hidden plague that wiped them out? Experts are still debating, but no answer seems to fit. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of history, make sure to follow us for more intriguing mysteries like this one. And don't forget to share this with someone who loves ancient history.
The Tartaria mud flood theory is a controversial hypothesis that suggests a catastrophic event took place in the 18th or 19th century, resulting in a massive flood of mud that covered entire cities and wiped out entire civilizations. According to this theory, the civilization of Tartary, which was once a powerful empire that covered a large part of the Eurasian continent, was destroyed by this event, and its existence was deliberately erased from history by the ruling elite. One of the main pieces of evidence cited by proponents of the Tartaria mud flood theory is the presence of mysterious buildings and structures in various parts of the world that seem to be older than the officially recognized timeline of human history. These structures, known as megaliths, are often made of large stone blocks that would have been impossible to move and erect using the technology available at the time they were supposedly built. Another piece of evidence cited by proponents of the Tartaria mud flood theory is the strange architectural features found in many old buildings in Europe and elsewhere. These features, such as strange windows and doorways, seem to have no practical purpose and are unlike anything found in modern architecture. Proponents of the theory argue that these features are remnants of an older civilization that was destroyed by the mud flood. There are also claims that the Tartaria mud flood theory is supported by geological evidence. Some researchers have pointed to the presence of sedimentary layers in certain regions of the world that seem to indicate a massive flood event took place at some point in the past. Other researchers have claimed that the soil samples from various parts of the world contain high levels of unusual substances, such as iridium, that are typically associated with meteor impacts or other catastrophic events. Proponents of the Tartaria mud flood theory argue that the mainstream scientific community has ignored or deliberately suppressed this evidence in order to maintain the status quo and avoid acknowledging the possibility that there may have been an advanced civilization that was wiped out by a natural disaster. They also argue that the ruling elite have deliberately erased the memory of Tartary from history in order to maintain their own power and control over the population.
President Kennedy was because he was going to release information on this. It's a burned document that was found, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago, and it talked about buildings being on the dark side of the moon. He was in the Navy. He had a top security clearance. He was going to be handling video and film that came back from combat missions. And he goes, he got brought into a room one day. He said, the guy said, stay here, wait right here, I'll be right back. And he goes, so I'm standing in this dark room where they're developing the film, and the guy says, hey man, you want to see something really cool? Come over here. So he's like, oh, okay. So he goes, I go over there and check it out. And he starts showing me buildings on the dark side of the moon. And he said to me, these aren't ours. 40 different creatures that were coming here, 40 different aliens or 40 different terrestrials, ETs that were coming here. One of the former prime ministers of England said the U.S. has been dealing with a group called the Tall Whites for like the last 15 or 20 years. The Tall Whites were a group of very Nordic-looking extraterrestrials, very tall, light hair, just very, very big. There was some talk that in the early 30s that there was a guy, his name was Thor, and he was a tall white, and he was working within the Senate and Congress. You know, UFOs were as real as planes that fly over your house. I mean, he said, there's no denying it, they're there. You know, we know they're there.
Did the Titanic truly sink, or is this a J.P. Morgan hoax? Theorists suggest the Titanic was swapped with her twin, the Olympic, in an audacious insurance scheme. They even accuse Morgan of using the disaster to eliminate his competitors. These ships, though twins, were distinct, with unique identifiers on their panels. Swapping them would require an implausible feat of labor involving hundreds of workers, likely drawing attention from the ever-watchful press and shipyard visitors. Insured for $5 million, but costing $7.5 million? A curious insurance scam, right? Morgan, orchestrating an iceberg hit and managing lifeboats? A tall tale. This conspiracy? Under scrutiny, it sinks faster than the ship it imitates.
The Great Pyramid, over 2 million blocks of stone, and nobody realized that they're all different 2 million blocks. They're each individual stone is totally different from the other one. Now you have to take into consideration the subterranean part of the Great Pyramid, like the subterranean shaft, which cuts through solid stone and goes down 65 meters. How in the world did they cut that through solid stones that were already stacked? Some type of a laser cutting tool. Mud ramp theory, the floating theory is a farce. You can't float these stones. What are you displacing mass with for that level of mass in water? Highly unlikely that they would be able to displace that much mass to keep them floating. Once you start really analyzing the stones, the structures, the way that they're interlocked, you see there's an interlocking design system. And each stone is custom made to be put in place, which means it needs to be created at the moment that it's needed. How do you do that? How are you going to get this stone up this mud ramp or float it up into this area and then put it into a spot that it doesn't really fit? Oh, I made a mistake. It doesn't go here. Doesn't make any sense.
One of the things I find most striking is the presence of Antarctica on ancient maps, because we didn't discover it until 1820, and yet it's on maps drawn in the 1500s with great detail. The so-called Pinkerton world map, it just shows a hole where Antarctica is. Because it was an honest map. Nobody had found it by then. But if you go back to, for example, the Wolsey-Willer world map drawn in 1530 or thereabouts, you find Antarctica is present. Orontius Phineas. Go for Orontius. Oronteus. Phineas. The Orontius Phineas map. That map shows Antarctica exactly where it should be. And it shows it, there we go. Right-hand side, there's Antarctica at the tip of South America, just south of South Africa.
And what did they call it back then?
Well, they call it the Southern Land. And it's larger than it is today, but it was larger than it is today during the Ice Age. Antarctica was a much bigger. Now, what the fuck is it doing on a map drawn in the 1500s, which we know was based on older source maps when nobody knew it existed in the 1500s? To me, the obvious answer is we are dealing with the fingerprints of a lost civilization.
The Egyptian artifacts make absolutely zero sense, and archaeologists might just be afraid of being wrong. How is it the further back in time we go, the more advanced they get? Egypt is old, like really old. Egypt is so old that even ancient Egyptians studied ancient Egyptian history thousands of years older than them. When the Romans discovered the pyramids, they were older to the Romans than the Romans are to us today. Woolly mammoths still roamed the earth when they were first built. And of course, everyone knows that Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the iPhone, or hell, closer to you watching this video right now than she did to the construction of the pyramids. What's strange is that as time went on, their artifacts somehow got less and less advanced. The Egyptian Empire reigned for about 3,000 years, divided into approximately 31 dynasties classified into the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms. When we go back to the first 5 or so dynasties, the Old Kingdom, we see impressive feats of design engineering unlike any other. And impressive is an understatement. These are straight up machine perfect down to the micrometer. Like this round vase, perfectly balancing itself dead center on a point no larger than the tip of an egg. Except this isn't your pottery class vase made of clay. It's granite. And granite is harder than steel. That's a fact. Here are the numbers. Here's another vase, slightly chipped, revealing its walls are as thin as a playing card. Another bowl made from diorite, a stone as hard or even slightly harder than granite, whose walls are literally 1/40th of an inch or 0.5 millimeter thick. We have no idea how to make granite pottery like this using known ancient methods, although high-tech machines could probably do the trick. But I don't think you realize how insane it is to suggest that this level of mechanical precision was achieved on on granite using primitive tools softer than granite, the official claim. And these are just a few. There were over 40,000 of these artifacts found under the Step Pyramid of Djoser dating back to the 3rd or 4th dynasty, with some suggesting they're actually pre-dynastic, meaning they're even older, and the Old Kingdom Egyptians just inherited them from a previous civilization. Oh, we're in too deep now, Johnny boy. It's only in recent times when we finally analyzed them with modern light scanning technology that we found out how mind-bendingly precise they really are. They took a jar, did some measurements in a lab, and to this day, Egyptologists have no explanation for these results. The top of the vase was 3/1000ths of an inch away from being perfectly flat, something only possible with like CNC machines today. For reference, a sheet of paper is 7/1000ths of an inch thick. A human hair is 2 to 3. This thing was a literal hair away from being perfectly flat. The inside lip of the vase's mouth was 1/1000th of an inch away from being perfectly perpendicular to the top, which is a mathematically flawless right angle. And the entire vase was 13/1000ths of an inch, which is still just like 2 sheets of paper away from being perfectly circular. These are legit CNC machine level perfections, mass produced over 40,000 times on a material harder than steel using copper and stone tools by hand. Oh, and they might be pre-dynastic before copper tools were widely even used. I don't see an ounce of logic in that. Okay, maybe this one was just a fluke, right? A one-off perfect vase as a result of mass producing over 40,000 of them. So they took more into the lab and found even more astonishingly accurate measurements, revealing alleged machine-calculated mathematical use of pi, the golden ratio, and more, again to within thousandths of an inch of accuracy. That's like that much. Everything from the flatness of the base, the roundness, and even the uniformity of the thickness of the walls was nothing less of CNC machine perfection. Justifying this by saying they were just really skilled or they had a lot of time does not explain this level of precision with the known tools and methods at their disposal. There are even some vases that are reportedly made from corundum, which is magnitudes harder than granite and sits right behind diamond on the hardness scale. Although this one is for some reason debated, a lot of people claim it isn't made from corundum, but still others insist it is. A single one of these pots would have likely taken weeks, if not months, given modern explanations. Shouldn't there be evidence of their highly precise techniques all over ancient Egypt? Oh, there was this. A hieroglyph outlining the sculpting of an alabaster vase, one of the softest materials ever, softer than marble, and totally possible with their tools. But it's been proven that the technique outlined here would not work with granite. Sure, cutting into huge slabs using rough and painstakingly slow techniques using those tools might be possible, as we've seen them desperately trying to prove, but the force of friction required to achieve that simply would not be possible on small, delicate artifacts like these, never mind how machine accurate they are. Some of these vases are as small as a thimble, not even practical, and even harder to make, almost like they were just showing off, like, look what we can do. One theory is that these vases were spun on some sort of grinding tool, for which they have no evidence, no recordings of, but that's completely blown out of the water with the lug handles on the sides here. It's pretty obvious these wouldn't be possible from spin grinding. Absolutely no one can explain how these lug handles were made, which again, lab results showed that they too were perfectly symmetrical and level to each other to within thousandths of an inch. Later dynasties even tried recreating these jars, and although still impressive, are nowhere near the precision of the earlier ones. This level of advanced pottery is said to have reached its peak in the first 2 dynasties, and then poof, they just forgot how to do it, which leads people to believe these artifacts might be much older than anyone thinks. What if they inherited them from even earlier previous civilizations? And it doesn't end with these. There's also the schist disc crafted from a single piece of stone. Tell me, what kind of stone can be shaped like this by hand? No one really knows what this is, said to be a bowl or a flower holder of some sort, even though it looks sorta mechanical. Recovered from a 1st dynasty tomb, and again thought to be even older than that. Then we get to the statues, and these somehow make even less sense. The face of Ramesses at Luxor. Several of these statues were made in honor of the pharaoh Ramesses. Engineer Christopher Dunn noticed that there was something off about these faces. They were perfect, but almost too perfect, and not in a human way. He took a photo of the statue head, made it 50% transparent, flipped it, and overlaid the left side on the right side. Doing this, he discovered the face was perfectly symmetrical. Centerline measurements confirmed this too. It's like half the head was carved, then copy-pasted to the other half. We see consistent eye-to-mouth profile ratios across all of these statue heads. Something that we'd likely do with like 3D modeling programs today, computer accurate precision. Same thing with the crowns on their heads, and this wasn't done just once but repeated among many statues. This isn't something that anyone could just eyeball, but experts insist they were all done by hand. Professional sculptor Mike Leckie even wrote in a letter saying that his modern diamond tools would have been well worn out before barely even starting to sculpt something like this out of granite, and states that it would have been borderline impossible to repeatedly achieve this level of accuracy time and time again using only the tools we have evidence of. What machining technologies did ancient Egyptians or even earlier civilizations before them possessed that archaeologists just simply refuse to even consider.